7 people went to sleep in a beautiful mountain cabin and never woke up. The last person to see them alive was me. And I'm the reason they're dead. There was no malice in it, no dark intent. My hands are clean of violence, but they are stained with something far heavier: responsibility. Have you ever had to trust someone to fix something vital in your home? A plumber for a leaking pipe, an electrician for a flickering light, a handyman for a broken furnace. You let them into your space. You trust their confident smile, their years of experience, the logo on their truck. You hand over the safety of your family based on the simple belief that they know what they're doing. The Morrison family trusted me. They welcomed me into their vacation home, smiled, and put their lives in my hands without a second thought. That trust became their tomb. This wasn't a crime of passion or a calculated act. It was worse. It was an act of overconfidence, a single, careless shortcut born from pride, a fatal assumption that unleashed a silent, invisible killer that filled their home while they slept, peacefully and unaware. I didn't just fail at my job. I failed them as human beings. Stick with me, and I'll tell you how the simple desire to be the guy who could fix anything led to a catastrophe that tore a family apart and sentenced me to a prison of my own making. This isn't just a story, it's a weight I carry every second of every day. Before we go any further into the darkness, if you appreciate stories that uncover the hidden consequences of everyday decisions, please hit the like button and subscribe to Coffin Confessor. Your support helps bring these important confessions to light. 3 years ago, I was a different man. My name is Marcus Rivera, and in the small, tight-knit community of Breckenridge, Colorado, that name meant something. It meant reliability. I was the senior property maintenance coordinator for Premier Mountain Rentals, which is a fancy title for the guy who could fix anything. Leaky faucet in a luxury condo, frozen pipes in a remote cabin, a furnace acting up on the coldest night of the year. My phone was the one that rang, and I always answered. I took an immense amount of pride in that. In a town full of specialists who charged a fortune, I was the generalist who got it done, no matter the hour, no matter the problem. The property owners loved me for it. I saved them thousands. The guests loved me because I saved their vacations. I remember one Christmas Eve, a blizzard was hammering the mountains. I got a frantic call from a family in one of our biggest rentals. The pipes in the main wall were frozen solid. No water, and the temperature inside was dropping fast. The protocol was clear: call an emergency plumber. But that would have meant a 4-hour wait and a bill that would make your eyes water. So I went over myself. I used a set of industrial heaters, some thermal blankets from my truck, and a bit of intuition, rerouting heat from the main fireplace through a crawl space. It was an unconventional fix, a complete shortcut, but within 2 hours, the water was flowing. The family was ecstatic. The owner called me a miracle worker and slipped a $500 bonus into my hand. That $500 bought my daughter Sophia's first real ski set. Seeing her face light up that morning, seeing the pride in my wife Lisa's eyes, that was everything. My identity wasn't just about fixing things, it was about providing. Every problem I solved on my own was another brick in the foundation of the life I was building for them. I was a good husband and a doting father. My world revolved around Lisa's warm laugh and the way Sophia would run into my arms when I came home, my clothes smelling of sawdust and machine oil. I was their rock, their protector. My competence at work was the shield that kept our little world safe and warm. But that competence was built on a dangerous foundation. The culture in property management, especially in a competitive resort town, is all about speed and efficiency. Owners don't want to hear about calling in an expensive HVAC specialist for a furnace that's just being a little fussy. They want you to handle it. They want the quick fix, the cheap solution. You become a jack of all trades, and your ego starts to believe you're a master of them too. Every successful shortcut, every time you prove the specialist wrong, it adds another layer of armor to your pride. You start to believe you're invincible, that there's no problem you can't outsmart. You are the guy who gets it done. You are reliable. You are the hero of the story. You have no idea that you're about to become the villain. Wednesday, February 8th, began like any other winter day in the high country, brutally cold and brutally busy. A cold snap had descended on the mountains, plunging temperatures to 15 below zero. For me, that meant a symphony of ringing phones. My work phone started buzzing before I'd finished my first cup of coffee. It was a cascade of minor emergencies. A frozen pipe here, a drafty window there, a hot tub that wouldn't heat. I was in my element, triaging problems, juggling my schedule, feeling that familiar rush of being the man everyone needed. Around 10:30 a.m., a call came in for the Cedar Lake vacation home. It was one of our larger properties, a beautiful 4-bedroom cabin tucked away in a remote corner of the woods. The guest, Anna Morrison, was polite, calm, but concerned. She said the heating was acting strange, kicking on and off, never quite getting the house warm enough. There was no panic in her voice. It was just another item on my growing list, another fire to put out. I told her I'd be there in about an hour. When I pulled up to the cabin, the scene was exactly what you'd expect for a family ski trip. 2 SUVs with ski racks were parked in the driveway, and I could see a couple of teenagers through the window, laughing in the living room. Anna met me at the door, a kind-faced woman with a warm smile. She introduced me to her husband, David, and pointed me toward the utility closet in the basement. They were gracious, apologetic for bothering me, just happy someone could come out so quickly. They had no idea they were welcoming their executioner into their home. Down in the cramped, cold utility closet, I found the furnace. It was an older model, probably close to 20 years old, but that wasn't uncommon in these properties. I popped the cover off and watched it run. Just as she'd described, it would fire up, run for a few minutes, then shut down before the house reached the target temperature. A classic cycling issue. My mind immediately ran through the checklist. I pulled out the flame sensor and cleaned the carbon buildup off with some steel wool. I swapped out the dirty air filter for a fresh one. Basic stuff. Maintenance 101. The furnace kicked back on, and this time it stayed on. It purred along, a steady, reassuring hum. I could feel the hot air starting to push through the vents. Problem solved. But as I packed up my tools, a small voice of doubt whispered in the back of my mind. This unit was old. Cycling can be a symptom of a much deeper problem, like a cracked heat exchanger. The proper protocol, the one written in the company manual I hadn't looked at in years, was to recommend a full diagnostic by a certified HVAC specialist for any furnace over 15 years old showing these kinds of symptoms. For a moment, I considered it. I could call the owner, Patricia, and tell her she needed to get a specialist out here. But I knew what she'd say. It would cost her a fortune for an emergency call. It would inconvenience the guests. And what if I was wrong? What if it really was just a dirty sensor? I'd look like an amateur who couldn't handle a simple fix. My pride, that damn stupid pride, took over. I was Marcus Rivera. I was the guy who saved owners money, the guy who handled things. I wasn't the guy who passed the buck and ran up a bill. I convinced myself I had it handled. I went back upstairs into the warmth of the living room. "All set," I announced with a confident smile. It was just a dirty sensor. "She's running like a top now. You folks should be warm and toasty in no time." David shook my hand, thanking me profusely. Anna offered me a cup of coffee, which I politely declined. I had other calls to get to. As I walked to my truck, I gave them a final wave. The whole family was there in the big window, smiling, waving back. That image is burned into my memory. A family portrait in a window frame, alive, happy, and trusting, and completely doomed. I drove away feeling a sense of accomplishment, another job well done. I had no idea I was driving away from a tomb I had just sealed. The next 2 days were a blur of relentless work. The cold snap held its grip on the mountains, and my job list only grew longer. I spent Thursday wrestling with a commercial boiler at a downtown lodge, and most of Friday dealing with a series of frozen pipes in a new condo development. The Cedar Lake cabin and the Morrison family never once crossed my mind. In my world, a completed job was a closed chapter. I had fixed their furnace, and I had moved on to the next crisis. While I was unclogging a drain or replacing a thermostat, their world was ending in the background of my own, completely unnoticed. The silence from their cabin was absolute, but I wasn't listening. Saturday arrived with a fresh blanket of snow. The checkout time for the Cedar Lake property was 11 a.m. When noon came and went, I didn't notice. It wasn't until 12:30 p.m. that my phone rang. It was Patricia Kellerman, the property owner. Her tone was clipped. All business. "Marcus, the cleaners are at Cedar Lake, and they can't get a response. The guests haven't checked out, and their cars are still in the drive. Can you go over there and see what's going on? I don't want to lose the cleaning slot." My first reaction was a flash of annoyance. A late checkout on a Saturday was a logistical headache. It meant rescheduling cleaners and potentially delaying the next guests. I figured they had probably slept in, or maybe their cars were snowed in. Fear was the furthest thing from my mind. I told Patricia I was on my way, grabbing my master keys and heading for my truck, mentally preparing to deliver a polite but firm eviction notice. The drive to the cabin takes about 15 minutes from town. The road winds up the mountain, getting narrower and more isolated with each turn. The fresh snow deadened all sound, the world muffled under a thick white quilt. It was beautiful, the kind of winter scene people pay a fortune to see. But as I got closer, the beauty started to feel heavy. The silence felt different. It wasn't peaceful. It was empty. I turned onto the long private driveway of the Cedar Lake home. The 2 family SUVs were still parked exactly where they had been on Wednesday, now covered in a half-foot of undisturbed snow. There were no footprints leading to or from the vehicles, no tracks around the house. The only sound was the crunch of my tires on the fresh powder. The cabin itself looked still, almost like a photograph. No lights were on, but that wasn't unusual for daytime. Yet, something was profoundly wrong. A deep, primal instinct in the back of my mind began screaming at me. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness. This wasn't a late checkout. This was something else entirely. My hand was shaking, as I inserted the master key into the lock. The cold metal felt alien against my skin. The deadbolt turned with a heavy, final-sounding thunk that echoed in the profound quiet. I pushed the door open and was immediately hit by a wall of thick, stagnant warmth. It was stifling, far too hot for a house this size, and the air felt heavy, dead. There was no television on, no music playing, no sounds of conversation or movement. The only noise was the low, persistent hum of the furnace fan, pushing air through the vents, the very furnace I had worked on. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding unnervingly loud in the stillness. "Premier Mountain Rentals. Is anyone here?" Only the hum of the blower answered me. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me, and the silence of the house enveloped me completely. The living room was tidy, but lived in. A board game was sitting half-played on the coffee table next to a few empty mugs. A teenager's jacket was slung over the back of a chair. It looked like a family had just stepped out for a moment. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that they hadn't. My feet felt like lead as I moved toward the hallway that led to the bedrooms. "Hello, Mr. Morrison?" I called again, my voice cracking this time. The dread was a physical thing now, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. I pushed open the first door. It was the master bedroom. For a split second, my mind registered a perfectly normal scene. A couple asleep in bed, covers pulled up to their chests. It was David and Anna. They looked so peaceful, so utterly at rest. But they were too still. Their faces had a pale, waxy quality. I took a hesitant step closer, my breath catching in my throat. I knew I didn't need to check for a pulse. I knew what I was looking at. I backed out of the room slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs, a silent scream building inside me. My mind refused to accept it. It had to be a mistake, a terrible coincidence. I moved to the next door, my hand trembling so badly I could barely turn the knob. Inside, 2 beds. A boy and a girl, the teenagers I had seen through the window, were in their own beds, tucked in, looking like they were just sleeping late on a Saturday morning. But they were gone too. The same unnatural stillness, the same placid expressions. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a massacre without a single drop of blood. There were 2 more bedrooms. I moved like a machine, an automaton compelled to see the full extent of the horror. In one room, an older woman, David's mother, was asleep in her bed, a book resting on the nightstand beside her. In the last room, another couple, Anna's brother and his wife. All of them, every single one, 7 people, an entire family, wiped out in their sleep. I stumbled back into the living room, my legs threatening to give out. I leaned against a wall, gasping for air, my mind racing, trying to find an explanation. A gas leak? A sickness? And then I heard it again. The low, steady hum. The furnace. My fix. The memory hit me with the force of a physical blow. The aging unit. The cycling issue. My decision to clean a sensor and ignore the deeper possibility. The stifling heat in the house suddenly felt like the breath of a monster. The air I was breathing, the very thing keeping me alive, was what had killed them. The silent, invisible killer wasn't some random act of fate. It was me, my pride, my shortcut. My phone felt impossibly heavy in my hand as I pulled it from my pocket. My fingers fumbled with the screen as I dialed 911. The operator's voice was calm, professional, a voice from another universe. 911, what's your emergency? I need... Send someone, I stammered, my voice a ragged whisper. Cedar Lake Vacation Home. Everyone. Everyone is dead. Sir, calm down. What is the address? I gave her the address, my words slurring together. Can you tell me what happened? She asked, her voice still level. I don't know. They're all asleep. They won't wake up, I cried, the words choking me. Oh God, the furnace. I was here. I was here on Wednesday. I worked on the furnace. The confession tumbled out of me, a torrent of guilt and horror. I wasn't reporting a scene. I was implicating myself. I was the last one here. I was the one who touched the machine that was still humming its deadly lullaby. The weight of this moment is something I carry every single day. If this story is resonating with you, please share it. You never know whose life it might save. And let me know in the comments, has a story ever made you check the safety devices in your own home? The minutes I spent waiting for help to arrive felt like a lifetime. I stood on the snow-covered porch, shivering, not from the cold, but from a deep, internal tremor I couldn't control. The first to arrive were the paramedics, followed closely by the fire department. I watched as they entered the house, their movements urgent and professional. A moment later, one of the firefighters came back out, a device in his hand that was emitting a piercing, high-pitched shriek. He looked at me, his face grim. The house is saturated with carbon monoxide, he said, his words hitting me like stones. Levels are lethal. There it was, the official confirmation of my failure, the scientific name for the monster I had unleashed. From that moment on, I was no longer a witness. I was the focal point of a major death inquiry. The police separated me from the scene, putting me in the back of a squad car while the house was cordoned off with yellow tape. I watched as a procession of official vehicles made their way up the long driveway, turning the quiet, snowy landscape into a chaotic hub of activity. The questions began. They were cold, repetitive, and clinical. What time was I at the property on Wednesday? What work did I perform? What tools did I use? Did I notice anything unusual? Every question felt like an accusation. Every answer a nail in my own coffin. I told them everything, my voice hollow. The story of my simple fix now sounding like a confession of profound negligence. The world I had known began to disintegrate with breathtaking speed. On Tuesday, February 14th, Valentine's Day, I was called into the main office of Premier Mountain Rentals. My boss, a man I had worked with for 8 years, couldn't even look me in the eye. He slid a termination letter across the desk. Our insurance requires it, Marcus, he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. We have to distance the company from the incident. Just like that, my career was over. The identity I had built, the pride I took in my work, was stripped away in a sterile 10-minute meeting. I walked out of that office and was no longer Marcus Rivera, the reliable handyman. I was just the guy from the news, and I was on the news. The local station ran a story on the Breckenridge cabin tragedy. They were careful with their words, but my name was in the public record, and in a small town, that's all it takes. People would see me in the grocery store and quickly look away. Friends who used to greet me with a wave now crossed the street to avoid me. The judgment wasn't spoken, but it was everywhere. A thick, suffocating blanket of suspicion and condemnation. I was the man who had brought a dark stain to our perfect mountain town. Then came the legal notices. 3 separate envelopes arrived at my home, one from each branch of the Morrison family. They were wrongful death lawsuits. Seeing the word on the page, negligence, recklessness, culpability, made it all brutally real. It wasn't just a tragedy anymore. It was a legal battle where I was the central defendant. My name, my actions, my single arrogant decision were now the official cause of 7 deaths. I had lost my job, my reputation, and my peace of mind. I felt financially ruined before a single dollar had been discussed, and morally bankrupt beyond any hope of recovery. My world hadn't just cracked, it had been completely and utterly demolished, and I was left standing alone in the rubble. The legal system and the court of public opinion were one thing, but the real trial took place within the 4 walls of my own mind. Sleep offered no escape. When I did manage to drift off, the nightmares would come. I would be back in that silent, overheated house, walking from room to room, discovering the family over and over again. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, the hum of the furnace ringing in my ears. During the day, I was haunted. I became obsessed, spending hours online, reading everything I could about carbon monoxide poisoning. I studied diagrams of heat exchangers, read coroner's reports from other cases, and memorized the lethal parts per million concentrations. It was a form of self-torture, a desperate attempt to understand the mechanics of the monster I had created. My guilt was a toxic cloud that filled our home, and my wife, Lisa, was forced to breathe it every day. She was my rock, but I could see the toll it was taking on her. She had to face the whispers in the community, the pitying looks from other mothers at our daughter's school. She was grieving for the victims too, for the family I had destroyed, while also trying to hold her own husband together. The strain was immense. We started arguing over small things, the tension between us a constant unspoken presence. My silence was as damaging as any angry words. I was withdrawing, building a wall around myself that she couldn't penetrate. It took us 3 months of difficult, painful couples counseling to even begin to find a way to talk to each other again, to acknowledge that this tragedy hadn't just happened to me. It had happened to us. The heaviest burden was Sophia. She was only 6, too young to understand the full weight of what had happened. All she knew was that her father was sad, that he didn't laugh anymore, and that he had lost his job. We told her that Daddy had an accident at work. The simplicity of the lie felt like a betrayal. How could I ever explain to my beautiful, innocent daughter that her father was responsible for the deaths of other people's children? Protecting her from that truth felt like a necessary act of love, but it was a heavy secret to carry, another layer of deceit in a life that now felt completely fraudulent. When the funerals were held, I knew I had to go. I didn't deserve to be there, to share in the family's grief, but I felt compelled to witness the consequences of my actions. I stood at the back of the church for each service, a ghost in the crowd, my heart aching with a pain so profound it felt physical. I listened to the eulogies, hearing about David's kindness, Anna's dedication as a teacher, the bright futures of their children, Tyler and Megan. I saw the devastated faces of their loved ones, their raw, unfiltered sorrow. I was the cause of all of it. There is no court sentence, no legal judgment that can ever compare to the life sentence of knowing you are the reason for that much pain. That is a prison from which there is no escape. Breckenridge had been our home, but now it was just a town full of ghosts. Every street corner, every shop, held a memory of the man I used to be and the tragedy I had caused. For the sake of our marriage and for Sophia's future, we knew we couldn't stay. 6 months after the incident, we packed up our lives and moved to Steamboat Springs. It wasn't about running away from what I did. That was impossible. It was about finding a place where we could breathe again, a place where my daughter could grow up without the shadow of her father's mistake hanging over her. I couldn't go back to property management. The thought of being responsible for the maintenance of someone's home made me physically ill. For a while, I took whatever work I could find, mostly manual labor on construction sites. But I knew I couldn't spend my life just hiding. If I was going to live with my guilt, I had to make it mean something. I had to turn my penance into a purpose. So I made a conscious, deliberate choice. I enrolled in certification courses for gas appliance safety and HVAC systems. I studied with a fervor I had never known, driven by the faces of the Morrison family. Today, I work as a safety inspector for a regional propane company. My job is to go into homes and businesses and hunt for the very thing that I missed: the hidden flaw, the tiny crack, the potential for disaster. I am no longer the man who takes shortcuts. I am meticulous, obsessive, and hypervigilant. When I inspect a furnace, I don't just look at the surface. I use specialized cameras to examine the heat exchanger. I run exhaustive combustion analysis tests, and I check every single safety sensor. Every inspection is a search for the ghost of my own failure. I'm not just doing a job. I'm trying to ensure that no other family suffers the way the Morrisons did. It's not enough. I know it will never be enough. But it's a start. I also began volunteering with carbon monoxide awareness organizations. I share my story, not my name, but my experience, at safety training seminars for other maintenance professionals. I talk about the dangers of overconfidence, the seductive nature of the quick fix, and the catastrophic cost of a single assumption. It's the hardest thing I've ever had to do, reliving that day over and over. But every time I speak, I hope that one person in the room hears me and decides to call a specialist instead of taking a chance. It's a small act, but it's all I have. It's my attempt to build a life, not from the ashes of my old one, but from the very material of my greatest failure. I live a quiet life now. My marriage is strong, and my daughter is thriving. From the outside, we probably look like any other family, but the guilt is a part of me now, woven into my very being. It never disappears. The anniversary of that day in February is a difficult, silent weight that settles over our home each year. I live with the ghosts of the Morrison family every single day. I see their smiling faces in the window of that cabin, and I know that no amount of good work can ever balance the scales. The lesson I learned is etched into my soul. There is a razor-thin line between confidence and negligence. Pride in your work is a good thing, but it can become a blinder, preventing you from seeing the risks you are taking, not just with your own reputation, but with the lives of others. My confidence made me believe I was in control, but my negligence proved I was not. I'm telling you this story for one reason. I need you to hear me. Go, right now, and check your carbon monoxide detectors. Test them. Change the batteries. If you don't have them, please buy them. They are a few dollars, and they are the only warning you will ever get. If you are a renter, demand them from your landlord. Don't let your home, your safe place, become a trap. Don't let your family's safety rest on the hope that the person who was there before you did their job perfectly. This is the confession I live with. I can't bring those 7 people back. But every single day, I wake up and try to save 7 more. It's the only confession that matters. If it moved you, please subscribe to Coffin Confessor for more stories about the secrets people swear to take to their graves. Thank you for listening. Send your stories to Coffin Confessor 111 at gmail.com. to be featured on our channel.